Welcome to Yellow Table Talk, a podcast for women professionals interested in climate change. No climate experience necessary. My name is Michelle Lee, and I'm the co-founder of Women in Climate. My background is in software sales, and I've worked for some of the biggest companies in Silicon Valley and pivoted into climate in 2021. Together with my co-founder, Stephanie Corbally, we have created one of the largest virtual and in-person communities for women interested in climate change, with over 7,000 members in our Slack channel and active members across Asia, Middle East, Africa, North America, South America, and Europe. Head over to our website to learn more, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hi, everyone. Today, I'm here with a very special guest, Dr. Anino Emuwa, a global leader who is passionate about women's leadership and the founder of 100 Women at Davos. She's originally from Nigeria, studied in the UK, and currently resides in France. Welcome to Yellow Table Talk, Anino.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Well, we are delighted to have you. And as always, we open with what beverage you're having at the yellow table today. So, Anino, what's on your table?
Actually, it's just a glass of refreshing water.
And that is the same as me. And sometimes I feel like water is very underrated and we don't often appreciate it. But having a glass of water to enjoy together during our talk, I think is a perfect pairing.
Thank you.
Anino, I think we first met at COP28 at Goal's house, and I attended a lunch where you were a co-host. And since then, you have always been just a very friendly face wherever our paths and our worlds collide, from CSW 69 to London Climate Action Week to Davos. And I'm really, really glad that we can have you here today.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. But then again, before we met, I had been following you, so I knew quite a bit about you. I had joined Women at Climate in the group, and I was really delighted to meet you at COP28.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Anino. It really makes me happy to hear that some of our work has also crossed your path, so appreciate that. So, Anino, there's so much to say about you. Maybe we can start off by having you tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Michelle. A bit about my background. Well, I started off my career in banking, in corporate banking. When I was about 16 or so, I was really interested in finance. This is, one resource that you don't really see, and yet it was something that was the powerhouse behind organizations. And I decided at that age, I wanted to go into corporate or investment banking. And literally, that's what I did. I studied economics at the London School of Economics, monetary economics, the closest thing to banking, and then went to work with Citibank back in my home country, Nigeria, as a corporate banker. But very soon, after sort of leaving the UK, coming back to my continent in Africa, and having the opportunity to work and travel and live in different countries in Africa, I began to see a pattern, which was the lack of finance for smaller businesses, which I thought was really important, that in order that we have growth and development, that smaller businesses also had finance, that it wasn't all about bigger businesses. And very soon I became very curious to understand why this wasn't the case, because of course I was in corporate banking, I was making big loans at a young age, but smaller businesses were not getting finance. And then I realized very quickly that there were barriers to finance for smaller businesses. But at the same time, looking at the barriers to finance, I was also looking at women-led businesses, entrepreneurs, and seeing that they had even more barriers. And that's truly what led me to start studying and learning more about women in leadership, women running businesses, and how to overcome some of these barriers. And fast forward many years later, I had been to the World Economic Forum, and of course, this is one of the most important summits for leadership. And it's clear that we didn't have enough women, but that's because it was a reflection of what is happening in real life, right? In fact, they even had a higher proportion of women leaders there compared to what happened in real life in terms of top leadership. But clearly it wasn't enough. And I felt that it was important that women were part of these discussions. And that's what led me really to found 100 Women at Davos, sort of giving women a sort of space, right, to amplify the voice of women leaders and also to help them access some of these rooms at leadership level. Some of these rooms are not necessarily published out there. The thing that happen behind the scenes and having access. So that's a story.
Wow. So like at the age of 16, you already knew what you wanted to do. You went on this journey to accomplish your goals. And then you found other challenges that you wanted to tackle through supporting small businesses and then supporting women and just seeing all those barriers that are up. So not everyone is familiar with WEF or the World Economic Forum. Can you tell us a little bit about the organization and the gathering that happens every January in Davos?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, I knew about it when I was very young in university, actually. So I already had this, idea of the World Economic Forum all those decades ago. But really, it's a global gathering of world leaders. So you have the top CEOs of private sector businesses from the US, originally US and Europe, but, all countries around the world, as well as government leaders and heads of international organizations as well. And you do have cultural leaders and youth leaders more and more these days. So it's actually quite mixed. But these are people who are working together to look at some of the most pressing challenges that the world has and to come out with, ideas of how can we address some of these challenges.
Thank you for that summary. And just thinking back, when did you first attend the World Economic Forum? It sounds like you already knew about it a long time ago while you were studying. When did you first attend it? What was it like? What do you remember most?
Oh, yes. It was in 2017, I think, was the first time I attended. And, like many conferences, before the event, you have a schedule, right? And you had the app and you had the schedule, and then you sort of choose which of the sessions you wanted. So you had the big plenaries, where the heads of state are, and then you had, lots of side ones. And I remember, and I still had the picture. Well, I believe it was the first one, either the first or second one. I'm not certain now. But one of the ones I wanted to attend was the session on artificial intelligence with Ginny Rometty, who was the CEO of IBM at that stage. And I still had the photograph. And so, I literally was the first in line to get into the room. And as soon as the session finished, I went up to speak to her. And she had this incredible smile on her face. She didn't know me. And I said, "Can we take a selfie?" And she goes, "My first selfie of the day." We took a selfie and we had a talk for 5 minutes. She was so open. And she was talking about Watson. Because if you remember, Watson was one of the first sort of big models, right, in those days. And Watson was being used primarily, I think, in terms of predictive data or diagnostic data for surgeons, cancer and all of that, because it could really pick out all the threads, right, from research and help doctors in a diagnosis. And so here she was running the one of the world's biggest tech companies, right, at the time as a woman. And there she was open. And there were 2 things. There was one, listening and being able to hear and speaking to her and the way in which she was warm. But also it meant that we were able to exchange. And I thought to myself, we need more women in this room because it is possible to exchange directly with people that normally you wouldn't have access to. So that is what really struck me. At the same time, it struck me that there just weren't, many women, because you sort of looked, and I thought, where are the women? And you had people like Christine Lagarde and world leaders like that, but in terms of participants, and what I felt is that let's not focus on how few women there are, but let's focus on the women who are there and who are they, right? And how can we bring more visibility to whom women who are attending? And so I attended 4 times. And since then, we have been running our events on the side lines of 100 Women at Davos, which isn't in any way related to the World Economic Forum itself. It's a side event.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting thing to note as well, is that there are the side events, and then there is the World Economic Forum, which is its the big event, the main event. You need a special security badge, you need an invitation. Very cool that you met Jeannie at your first Davos, your first World Economic Forum. And it's so funny, in 2017, we weren't really considering Watson as AI back then, but I guess they were. I just think in the general public, AI hadn't quite broken through yet. But I definitely remember Watson and all the amazing things that it was doing. And, when you went to WEF in 2017, like how did you even get there? There's not a lot of spaces. It's expensive for accommodations. Were you sponsored by your company? How did that happen?
Yes, and this is the thing, and I think is very important. And every year at 100 Women at Davos, we do have this conversation. It is a by invitation only. It's as simple as that, right? And you have strategic partners or the big companies who, as members, shall I say, are part of the World Economic Forum. So they automatically get invited together with, members of their organization. But then most other people is by invitation. And then, of course, you have heads of state. So it's not something that you can plan to be at unless you are a member of one of those organizations. And yet, over the last 5 years, with the exception, of course, of 2021, when we had COVID, in 2022, they had a summer Davos. I've been in Davos and been in Davos with the community and the other events. There's a lot happening, even outside the World Economic Forum, which is sort of similar to the United Nations General Assembly as well. You have a lot of side events and many of these big summits, lots of side events with leaders that are happening as well. So that's the similarity.
Yeah, I had the chance to be in Davos during WEF the first time this year. It was always kind of like this distant dream goal. I know that so many of the heads of states and heads of companies are there. I'm super curious. What's it like? What do they talk about? And how friendly are people? And it's funny because I think the part that stood out to me most was the housing. I feel like I could write a 3-part series book on finding accommodations at World Economic Forum. It was like such a journey. Everything worked out in the end. But yeah, it's, there's like this main street, you have companies and countries that have these so-called houses. Essentially, Davos is mainly a ski town. In the summer, a lot of people go to hike and there's like coffee shops and restaurants, but they vacate. And these companies come in, take over and put in their houses. There's events. And it was such an interesting place to be. I think it's changed a lot over the years, but I was really glad that I was able to attend. And it's funny because for me, going there, I wasn't at WEF. So I think it's different when you're actually, in those sessions. But for me, I didn't notice the lack of women, and probably because I was part of 100 Women at Davos and I was able to meet other women. My first day there, my housemates, a few of us just like went out for dinner, and then one woman led to another. And I felt like I had met so many women by the end of it. Of course, again, they're not at the forum itself, but I think there's a lot that you can do. And it starts with these types of initiatives just enabling more women to be there in the first place. So kudos to you and the work that you're doing. I did want to chat a little bit about women representation. I know that it's important to you, but it's also a chicken and egg problem. If women are not in leadership roles, they simply won't have the opportunity to attend. How do we make progress on this?
When it comes to representation, and you're right about the sort of chicken and egg problem, but there are two things. The first thing is very often people focus on women themselves. That is, what can we give women? How can we have sort of, leadership training, all of that, as if the issue will be solved by just equipping women with certain things. Whereas it's a systemic issue, so change needs to happen. Now, to increase women's representation, it is as simple as saying it's the will of leadership. Once you have leadership that wants to ensure that you have representation, it can happen very, quickly. So that's changing systems, right? And people who are in positions of power making change. So an example at the Web Summit when I attended a few years ago. This is a tech summit and the biggest tech summit in Europe at the time, held in Lisbon. Representation at the tech summit was 50-50. Would you believe that? In fact, the time I went, it was more than 50-50. It was a little bit more than 50-50.
Wow.
How did that happen? It doesn't happen by chance. It happens because they had decided that you needed to have representation. And so the Work for Women's Networks, they also did, for example, they had special prizes for women to attract women and all of that. So that's the thing about representation. We always say representation in terms of leadership. It's not about the 100% of population. It's about what's happening at that level. So you can have representation that is actually more skewed towards reflecting the population than recreating the issues in leadership. So what I mean by that is if you only have 5% of CEOs in the world, and if you want to have an event or you want to write about that, you can decide that, we'll just have that representation. Or you can say, no, it's a numbers game. We need to have equal numbers of women. We're interviewing 50 people, 50 women, 50 men. You can decide that. Or if you're reflecting people in a certain industry, there's nothing that says it has to reflect those numbers. You can say these are people that we want to focus on. So when you make a selection, you have the power to have representation within that selection. But then in terms of women in leadership, so that is at CEO level, CXO level, of course, we know the whole issue of the funnel and how that, over time, even at entry level, professional levels, it might be about equal, and then it sort of peters down. And then right at the top, we're talking only about 5 to 7%. How do we deal with that? Well, as I said, it's systemic, it's the organizations, it's inclusive behavior. How do you recruit, and not just recruit, how do you retain women? From Lean and McKinsey's report a couple of years ago, what they found was that women get left behind and which is why they talk about broken rung, at the first promotion, and it has nothing to do with competence. So we need to deal with the systemic issues in order to actually make change happen.
Are you seeing this shift in some ways?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The shift is happening. One example, and forgive me if I don't have the exact figures, but there is an organization, let's call it, called the 30% Club in the UK. And one of the chairs, I happen to know the chair before last. In fact, it was set up by Dame Helen Morrison many years ago, and she was at the time in leadership in one of the big banks in the UK, or several big banks in the UK, and they literally came together to work on how can we increase representation, working with organizations. So organizations basically signed up, right, in order to increase representation through sort of various steps. And it was called 30% because at the time, I can't remember how many years ago, the target was 30%, because 30% is also, you hear that once you have, get to up to 30%, then you have real change. Mm-hmm. Then, we do have power to have change. So that was a target. And this year or late last year, they actually found that they had exceeded that target. Representation at the board level is actually much more than 30% already. So change can happen, and change is happening. Of course, some industries are worse than other industries, for example, that are traditionally really male-dominated. In the tech industry as well, which is fairly recent, in the last 20 or 30 years, you've actually had a drop, right, in women in the tech industry. And this whole thing of tech bro wasn't there in the beginning. In fact, tech, in the very early years, women were the ones who had the computational brains for tech. Right? So it's been quite recent, but that's changing, but not as fast as it should be. AI is a big problem. The biggest companies, when you look at them, how many of them have women? So depending on industry and sector, it does change and vary. But overall, absolutely, it has been changing. So I think that when you're working towards change, we tend to be looking always at the gap. Because you want to close the gap, but we mustn't also forget where we came from. The issue in terms of change, is more of the speed of the change. And so when you're looking at it, it's taking 123 years or whatever it is, the World Economic Forum says, right? Many years ago, it would have been 200 years. So things are happening, but it's just that they're not happening fast enough. And like everything else, sometimes, you have your backs and all that. That happens in life. Progress is never linear. Things happen. But the point is, overall, things are absolutely improving. But we cannot rest on our laurels, because the cost is too high. And it's not just a woman thing. For me, it's economics. For me, it's always been about development. It's always about society. It's always about things being better for everybody. And if you let it take 123 years, society is suffering, organizations are suffering, human beings are suffering. So having sort of increased representation is what's best for organization, society, development, and economic growth.
Well said, Anino. And I'm definitely noticing the shift as well. And I hope over the next couple of years, we will be accelerating women's leadership. I think that is probably a common goal for us. And I guess that kind of leads me into my next question around 100 Women at Davos. How did the community come about? And what is the profile of a member? What is the goal and vision of this community?
It's interesting. And this is, again, when we tend to be mission-driven, you keep looking at what's still to be done. And very often you don't reflect. But we had reasons in terms of our work to have to reflect back on what we had been doing. And so 100 Women at Davos started, alongside the World Economic Forum. Actually started in the World Economic Forum, because it was where are the women, and gathering women who were there. And we literally sat on one bench. And one of our earlier members, she still says so to today, that we actually sat in a bench, all five of us, right? Until we heard what is happening outside, in Davos, and had more women. But really it was to sort of give more sort of visibility to women and sort of hear what women were doing. But also, like every woman knows in leadership, if there aren't many of you, very often it's quite lonely. And so it was also to give a sort of support as well. And then it was also to give that opportunity, as I said, to be able to engage with world leaders and share with you. I remember that we were standing outside the room, and a president or world president had just come out of the room with a group of people, and I wanted to speak to him. And the people around him said, of course, he's there to be spoken to. And we had this conversation, and I didn't realize somebody was just taking pictures. And I have this series of pictures that were being taken whilst I was engaging with a president of the world on the topic I wanted to engage with him, which had to do with women and leadership. And he was telling me what they were doing in his country and why they were doing it. So I thought, if we're not in the room, right, then how can we engage? So that was it. So it was to engage, it was to get visibility, and also visibility and access. So if that's how it started. But so it was in 2019, I think, we started off with the group. But right now, when we just go through our numbers, we have about 5,000 members, including 2,000 active physical members that we see. Last time in Davos, I think we had about 600 women who were registered to come into Davos. And we have women from 109 countries.
Wow.
The thing that I think is what we're most proud of, that it is truly a global, organization. We have, 109 countries well represented around the world.
That's fantastic. I mean, it's a space for women to connect. And I think these WhatsApp groups are so helpful for women, especially as any event that you go to, whether it's the World Economic Forum in Davos or COP or UNGA. Do you have any specific vision for the future of Women at Davos? Like right now it's a community, you've got this WhatsApp group, are you letting it sort of just, see where it goes, or do you have some bigger visions?
Oh, absolutely. It is what for us is driving our work to advance women's leadership, which is, the increased representation. So in addition to the support we give women coming together in a network and a group, we are a recognized brand, right? So, for example, we were invited to speak at the UN General Assembly last year on inclusive AI, for example. So we are recognized in that way. We have two partnerships that are going. One is on the Luxury Innovation Summit in Geneva, which is about how women, wealth, AI and sustainability are driving what's happening in that industry. So we have the keynote panel that we've curated, the thought leadership strategic one with some top women leaders from different countries. The Global Leadership Summit for Women, which will be in Marseille, which has Christine Lagarde will be speaking virtually on that. We have ministers from France who will be there. We are also a supporting partner at that forum, so we will be bringing not just women together. We are going to be launching this Global Leadership by Women movement at the event, which 100 Women at Davos is actually going to be moderating the last session, which would launch that movement and bringing in women there. Aside from the support with women, giving them access, also work on the policy side and collaborating with summits, but also with organizations. And lastly, even within what it is we're doing, apart from the access, we do things. For example, we're going to be launching a session on storytelling for women, which will be in September, storytelling for leaders, which is, rare, and not just for leaders, for women leaders, right? So we have those sort of high-level skills. We have Women and Wealth, which we'll have in October or November. So we also have those kinds of masterclasses as well. And then we collaborate with many other organizations in the same space because we are small and we certainly do not feel that this is something that we're doing on our own. It's through collaborations with other organizations, bigger ones, right, in the space that we can truly make change happen. And then also an important thing which will be launched in the next few weeks is that I'm representing 100 Women at Davos on the UN Women's Leadership Network, which has a network of around 100 women, which was set up by the UN Women, chaired by the executive director. And I think there must be at least 30 former heads of state or heads of government, female heads of government. So it's a really powerful network. And we'll have a campaign on leadership that will be public over the next few weeks as well. So a lot happening besides just the network itself.
Just to kind of close on a topic on Davos and WEF and women attending, I think that probably a lot of women aspire to be there. They would love to experience it. What should they be keeping in mind if they want to go to Davos for the first time during the World Economic Forum? What should they consider in their decision-making of when is the right time in their career to go? I'm curious if you have any advice.
The first thing that I would say to anybody who's listening and who wants to hear more is every year we have an Ask Me Anything session online open to anybody and everybody, which is normally around the end of the year, November or December. So that's the first thing. Follow us on 100 Women at Davos and you'll see that. So you can actually ask members live and they'll talk through things, and these important points. For me, the first thing is that it is strategic, right? It is not a touristic visit. It is strategic. So the first thing with the strategy is, what are your objectives? Those are things that do happen not the day you get there, not the day before you get there, but your first thought is, why do I want to get there? And what am I going to achieve when I get there? Right? Or what do I want to achieve when I get there? And once you have those clear, you can then map out what it is you want to do, because so many things are happening that the tendency is that you can get sidetracked with things that aren't going to help you to achieve those goals. So the first thing is to be clear why you want to go there, why you want to go, and what you want to achieve. For the 100 Women at Davos community, it is important that people who want to join have either been to Davos or are confirmed for Davos, because it is more than just about your own business objectives, which are clear and important. I mean, that's clear. You have to have those objectives, but it's also wanting to be collectively part of something that is going to change the world for a better place. That is what Davos is about as well. So those are the two things as well. So the thing is to be clear. What are your objectives? Why is it that you want to go there? And then you will be able to find out what kinds of things you can engage with and who you can engage with. And then, then you can have the implementation of that strategy. There's so many things are happening there. How do I select what I go to? And also what you find that once you have that, you will find that you tend to meet very senior people if you had a strategy and there's clarity, and you might meet them 2 or 3 or 4 times because you're clear about what you want to do. So you're going according to a certain track. And that is a way of building, in that 1 week, you can almost start to build relationships. So it's not just, oh, I met so-and-so, I met him or her here, and that's it. You can actually have an opportunity to meet them 2, 3 times, during the week, right? Even maybe 4 times, which allows you to get to know them, for them to get to know you, and to have sort of a lasting, impactful collaboration after the event. And the thing about it is, it's what happens after Davos that's important, right? Where you take all those connections and contacts and conversations to after.
Thank you for sharing those tips, Anino. I really appreciate that. My last question in the realm of our conversation here is, can you tell us about your professional and personal relationship to climate? Because, you do a lot of work around leadership, support of SDGs, specific to climate, professionally and personally. What's the relationship?
Yes, but even through 100 Women at Davos, which of course is a brand of our consulting company, Avandis Consulting, but even within 100 Women at Davos, we had 4 main pillars. So one is corporate leadership. The other one is entrepreneurial leadership, so founders, etc. And then we have 2 cross-cutting, which are sustainability, which includes climate, and the other one is emerging technologies. We have chosen those 2 because we feel that those are 2 things that are really important to determine the state of our world. So right through the whole theme, of course, is the whole theme about leadership and SDG-fied in terms of, advancing women's leadership. But sustainability and also emerging technologies, including AI and all of that, are 2 of our core pillars. So that's the first thing. And when it comes to me personally, somehow in all the things I'm doing, that is also an area that is important to me. The first thing is, one, I sit on the board of the Watch and Jewelry Initiative 2030, which is an association set up by Cartier and Carey, which has sustainability and inclusion at its core. So at a governance level, I'm working on bringing the industry right towards, taking climate action and sustainability decisions. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we have our presence, and not just in COP, but we run side events, whether it's virtually or whether it's physical, with leaders as well. But you see the thread that always runs through is always, how can we have more women in leadership? Because it's a critical thing for change and climate action. So the thread is about having more women in leadership positions, because we find that the research shows that once you have more women in decision-making by the organizations, you find that those decisions on ESG decisions, right, more initiatives are, come into play. So for us, it's about how do you get more women into leadership positions, driving sustainability action, right, in which climate is obviously the big one.
That's great. And, your community has so many different women leaders in it, and to have sustainability as one of the 4 pillars, I think is a great way to raise awareness around climate and sustainability among women leaders. So thank you for the work that you're doing there. Now, I want to switch gears a little bit, Anino, and I want to go into our Real Talk segment of YTT. All careers, professions, they have their ups and downs. And I think as women professionals, we experience different challenges, different wins. So I wanted to ask you if you have a win, a challenge, a story that has recently or is currently playing out in your personal or professional life that you think our audience, which is women professionals, may resonate with. We'd love to hear what you have to share.
Yes, I mean, the one that I think for me, which is very recent and very personal, right? And Michelle, of course, that was that just a month ago, I lost my mother.
Yes.
Yes. And I was sort of planning, planning a trip to go home. It was her 90th birthday. And so we were planning the event to go home. So literally, she was feeling a little bit poorly a few days before. So I broke my trip. I had a conference, but I said I wouldn't go to the conference. I was supposed to leave shortly after. So I left maybe 3-4 days earlier than planned. And I said, I'm going home anyway, but I might as well go home early. And so I flew out literally the next day, got my flight changed and flew out. And before I arrived, my mother had passed away when I was on the flight.
Oh, man.
I can't tell you how, how sort of heartbreaking that was. We're there to celebrate. Okay, fine, we're going early. And it was, this just came from nowhere. It literally, absolutely came from nowhere. And then you sort of say, there you are planning a birthday. And now you're planning a funeral in addition to mourning at the same time. But, if we remove the emotional aspect of it and look at certain things, what that made me do was to reflect on my mother's journey, because I went through her career when I was writing her tribute. And these weren't all the facts that I've always known, but it made me reflect more deeply on certain things. So, for example, she was the first female lawyer from the Midwest region of the country. I've always known that. But it became different. It became, what did that mean? What did she go through all these years ago to build a successful career? And at the age of 20, early 20s, she left from Nigeria on ships, as it was in those days, to the UK to study. So this is an African woman heading to the UK, to the Middle Temple. So what could possibly be the issues in today's world for me, right?
Yeah.
Is that. So that really was something that was critical. So it was turning that around, even with the sadness, right, into reflection and sort of realizing that there's a lot to be thankful for, but to know that I stand on the shoulders, and I don't say that lightly, and therefore I carry that legacy to others, not just my daughter, but to a lot of other people.
And, thank you so much for your vulnerability and sharing such an authentic part of your journey recently. I had read the tribute. It was a beautiful, beautiful tribute. And your mother was such an accomplished woman. And I'm sorry that she's passed, but I'm glad that we had a chance to talk about her and celebrate her today.
Thank you, Michelle.
And, thank you so much for joining us today at YTT and for sharing such an interesting topic on the World Economic Forum in Davos and hopefully making it a little bit more transparent. I really look forward to seeing all the work that 100 Women at Davos will be doing in the future, in the next couple of months. And I look forward to seeing you soon, Anino.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you so very much for having me on your show.
My pleasure. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us today. Head over to www.womenandclimate.co to learn more about how to join and support our free community. And be sure to subscribe to Yellow Table Talk wherever you get your podcasts. Stay tuned for the next episode.